What has been your biggest up leading up to this point in life? Alcoholism. I've battled with it for about 10 years now, but really started affecting my life about 3 or 4 years ago. Before that I was a highly functioning alcoholic. I didn't realize this was actually a step into dysfunctional alcoholism and thought it was as bad as it would get. I was wrong. While I was still getting blackout drunk every other night, I managed to keep my job. But then my job got tired of me showing up to work drunk, still smelling like a brewery, that they let me go. That was 3 years ago. I then jumped from job to job with brief dry moments. Until 2 years ago I finally went to AA. I cried that night. Like ugly cried. Because I saw a story that was identical to mine. After that night I went sober for about 350 something days. Then I relapsed. Pretty hard. I'm taking about 4-5 bottles of liquor in 4-5 days. Blackout benders. Got fired from my past 4 jobs for drinking on the job, and I have less than $200 to my name and currently unemployed. Rent is coming up and I don't have that. Oh, and my 30th birthday is next week. I'm terrified of my immediate future, but I'm 4 days sober and never touching alcohol again. Please, don't pick up the drink. She's a ruthless succubus who will suck you dry till you're an empty shell of your former self. Starting to smoke. I was a super heavy smoker. I was driving home from a charity event for American Cancer Society. I recognized the irony and I stopped at a rest stop to grab coffee. I was having a cigarette and a lady who had barely survived lung cancer came up to me in the parking lot and asked me to quit. She said, "I wish someone just came up to me and asked me to quit. So that is what I am doing for you. Please quit before it's too late." And so I stopped at the drugstore and got the patch. The process is uncomfortable and it took me a year of using it to finally come off of it, but it's been 6 years since I have had a cigarette. Please quit before it's too late. I like these threads because sometimes it makes me think, you know what? All things considered, I'm pretty alright. 2.5 years ago, in my last semester at college to become a props and paint person for TV and film. I went to college at 30 when I finally figured out what I wanted to do with my life. I helped a team lift a very heavy set piece. It was too heavy. We didn't have enough people, but we got it to where it needed to be. Turns out that lift up both of my wrists. For life. Spent the next 2 years after graduating trying to fix them. Figure out what was even wrong. End result. We don't know what's wrong. We can't fix it. Look into long-term pain management. So now I can't work the industry I wanted to be in. And I also can't even do a lot of the stuff I used to do. Can't lift anything more than 15 pounds without it hurting. I finally got a part-time job at an escape room. I could have been working in TV. Or at the very least, theater. But I can't bend my left wrist and any sort of repetitive actions hurts like a bitch. Guess what needs full mobility and functionality of my hands? Making props and painting sets. Being a floater, meaning being friends with multiple friend groups in life without really being a solid part in any one. Left with none eventually. Being scared of what people thought. Getting married to the wrong person. It led to a lengthy divorce in which time my ex tanked me financially. It took me years to recover. Took a very large dose of a research chemical thinking it'd be like acid. Went clinically insane for like a year and require inpatient hospitalization. Took me 2 years after that to build my life up and have a career. But I was never totally the same. Such is life. I should have stood up for myself and others multiple times instead of worrying about what others were thinking of me. Losing friends because I didn't put effort into maintaining the relationship. Nobody tells you when you're a kid just how hard it is to make new friends once you're past your college years. What? You expect us to choose just one? Kid with wrong person. Really ends your life for the most part. Staying with someone for way too long because I thought I could help them. I was 25 when I met her. She was broken and very needy. She had a lot of issues with herself. Mainly she always felt insecure and inadequate. For those times when she was okay, everything was amazing and she was the best person to be around with. but those times were rare. She was jealous about anyone and everyone. I didn't even hang around my friends anymore because she would make me feel guilty later on and she could never get along with them. I always thought I could help her, but only after everything fell apart did I realize that in my effort to always be there for her I broke myself. We broke up 2 years ago. I'm now 33 and just starting to fix relationships that I've abandoned because I was too focused on her. I don't blame her at all because that was my choice, but it's been hard. Tried to kill myself when I was 24. Did the whole inpatient thing and therapy. Now I'm 28. Still living with my parents and struggling to win the battle with my mental health. Really frustrating. I just want to be a functional adult. Probably dropping out of my dream college to be closer to my now ex. Regret that decision every single day. On my 16th birthday my much older brother killed himself. My regret is that I had called him to ask him to come out with my friends and I to celebrate at a local restaurant. But on the first ring thought he probably doesn't want to hang out with a bunch of 15 to 16-year-olds and hung up the phone. They found his body the next morning. I will never be whole again. I used to work for a business that provided service for people with disabilities. Basically it was state-funded service which was like public transportation for those who cannot use public transportation. I can give more details about it if you ask about it. We also did some return trips from hospital to home, for people who had gone to the hospital on ambulance, and now needed a ride home, but needed wheelchair, which they did own but it was back at their home, so regular taxi was out of the question, so we had a spare wheelchair in the car for these cases. One evening I went to pick up an elderly man from a hospital with the car's chair. As I arrived, I found out that the man was amputee, missing a leg more precisely, and probably over 80 years of age. Despite of this, he was in good spirits, talkative, and the trip to home went well. We were talking about things happening in the world and he was quite well aware of what's going on in the world, cracking jokes and so on. However, when we arrived at the given address, the man seemed slightly confused where we were. He claimed that he has never seen this place, so he cannot live here. I double-checked the address, from GPS, and from him, and that was correct. However, the man was adamant that he didn't know where we were at the time. I took him onto the lift that was at the back of the car. I thought that the darkness outside, and tinted windows on the back of the car just confused him, yet on the lift where he could see the building, he didn't recognize the place, which confused me. I had been instructed that I should never let my hand off the wheelchair if it's on the lift, yet the confusion that the man caused, I did exactly that. I locked the brakes on the wheelchair so he wouldn't accidentally roll off from the lift, and told him to wait a couple seconds, so I checked the list of names on the stairwell, just to see do I find his last name on the list. I managed to take 2 steps away from the car and wheelchair when I realized that I simply cannot leave the man as he is right now. I either have to put him back into the car, or down on the ground. As I turned around, I see the man leaning back, pushing the wheelchair's front tires off the lift, and his hands were supporting him from the knobs that release the brakes. And just at that moment the brakes released. The man fell head first about 2.5 feet 75 centimeters onto the ground. I of course immediately called an ambulance, and couple minutes later the man's wife came to see what was the hold up. The man passed away 2 days later in the hospital. Cause of death: blunt force trauma on the back top of the head, which led to brain swelling. And just to make clear, no, I have never been in jail, and the sentence was just €2,000 fine. I could have continued in that work, but for a while I had to get away from it. I just couldn't do it. Having an existential crisis leading me to drop out of college, quit my job, let my car get repossessed, racked up crazy debt, trouble with the law, trouble with alcohol, and just saying screw it by riding my bike across the country till I ran out of money and my parents had to buy me a plane ticket home before I starved. That was over a year ago and I'm still in limbo. Choosing the wrong degree multiple times. A few years ago finally decided on computer science, and I hate it. Only have like 8 classes left, so I would be stupid not to finish it, but I have no desire to do anything computer science related. I wanted to take 6 months off to volunteer before going to college. I was dating a girl I loved who was now a senior in high school. When she graduated, she was going to join the army, so I decided I'd take 18 months off for volunteering, hanging out with her, and working odd jobs. The semester I was going to go, my school messed up my grant paperwork and paperwork for a $750 book scholarship. Said they would not be able to fix it before the enrollment deadline, so I had to put it off another 6 months. Since I wasn't working saving up money, I started school 2 years behind my friends and peers without a cent gained, and the volunteering hasn't been much of a resume booster. On top of all this, 4 months after I started school, my girlfriend I was putting it all off for dumped me. Later found out she was cheating for the last 6 months of the relationship too. Alcoholism from age 19 to 23. 5 years sober now. Life is exponentially better now. Glad I made it through all that. You too. I tried to walk across a guardrail and ended up slipping and hitting my gooch in just the right spot that it tore my urethra. Had a catheter for about 3 months after that. Quitting a job before I had another one. Long story, which led to my savings being drained and my credit card debt soaring through the roof. I've recovered about a year later, but my savings are basically non-existent as I spent all of my excess paying down debt. Starting smoking at 16. I'll be 27 in May. I haven't touched a cigarette in 9, almost 10 months. I couldn't stand the smell of them when I did, and I sure as hell hate it more now that I quit. Holding on to hate and resentment about my dad has messed me up mentally. Instead of dealing with it in a healthy way, I've held on to the hate and resentment and have blamed him for everything wrong in my life. I'm in therapy now and trying to unlearn toxic behaviors.